and honored to have you. You are the Nestor of business in Zimbabwe, and we are very happy and fortunate to have you here. I would also like to welcome the other speakers and would like to thank our new regional coordinator, Alexa Gerard, for arranging this event together with our representative Bernd Doppelfeld, who is currently in Germany. Now, the question whether Zimbabwe is interesting or not for German and South African businesses can be easily answered. We had more than 90 people, 90 company representatives saying that they would join us today, and that speaks for itself. Zimbabwe is interesting for many, many of our companies. Unfortunately, Zimbabwe has not managed to live up to its full potential over the past decades, I have to say. Today's situation with COVID and with all the upheaval in the world, it is difficult to imagine how one can change it. But this webinar, this seminar should basically help to improve the situation in the interest of people and companies in Zimbabwe, but also in Germany and here in South Africa. What can be done? What are the opportunities for our members and friends? How can we intensify the business relations between companies from Zimbabwe and Germany and South Africa? This is the question that we want to deal with today. And I think that I should mention Germany Trade and Invest, and they have published recently a number of reports on business opportunities in Zimbabwe. And these reports, as compiled by the regional correspondent Fauzi here in Johannesburg, are helpful tools to get an entry into this Zimbabwean market. So please go to GTI website and have a look what might be helpful and interesting to you. I don't want to take too much time, but I would like to ask our guests from Zimbabwe, and that is the ambassador of Germany in Zimbabwe, but also Zeka Kuvarika, John Robertson, and also Dominikus Kollenberg. What effect did Corona have on the situation in Zimbabwe? And the second question is, were you and how were you affected by the unrest here in South Africa 2 or 3 weeks ago? Did the supply chain hold, or were there interruptions between Durban Harbor and Zimbabwe? The industrial lifeline of Southern Africa, which is the N3 highway, was interrupted, was closed for some hours, and it cost South Africa a lot of money to have this highway closed and then to reopen again. So these two questions are very important to us. The first one referring to Corona and the second one referring to the supply chains as they might have been affected by the unrest here in South Africa. With these few words, I would like to thank you all for attending, and I wish us an interesting and fruitful workshop today. Back to you, Alexa. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boddenberg. Okay, next up, as Mr. Boddenberg has already announced, we have the German ambassador to Zimbabwe, Ambassador Udo Volz, to talk on the German and Zimbabwean relations. Ambassador Volz, over to you.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much to the Chamber of Commerce in Johannesburg to organize this event today, which gives me the opportunity after more or less 6 months in Zimbabwe to share my impressions with you. I've seen the title is German-Zimbabwean Relations, but allow me to start off with a few remarks that go a bit wider and a bit further back. The current government goes back to the change of power in 2017 and then the elections in 2018. At that time, especially as I understood in the first half of 2018, there were quite high expectations that this change would also lead to a number of reforms in the economic and the political field. Now we are 3 years into the new government from 2018, and it seems already the campaign for 23 has more or less started, despite the fact that we are still 2 years away from it. If you compare it to the campaign in Germany at the moment for the elections, it's going to be only 6 or 8 weeks, it seems, while here it's more a long-term issue that keeps people busy in their activities in the political level. So what has happened in these 3 years since 2018? In the political field, one could say not too much. There had been, as I said, higher expectations, but then in 2018-19 there was a kind of setback, giving the impression that the new government also, if need be, would recur to violence also to prevent demonstrations to happen or to become bigger. So there has really been a setback in 2018-19. More recently, there had been changes of the constitution, which were not received very well by all quarters, as they were increasing the power of the president with respect to the nomination of judges and also the time that they are allowed to sit on the bench. Parliament also is facing a quite unusual situation that a number of seats are vacant due to the struggle within the opposition parties, one from the Movement for Democratic Change, which has been split for years now between the Tsvangirai and the Alliance. So because of this struggle, a number of people have been withdrawn from Parliament, and by-elections, which should take place, still haven't taken place, which means that Parliament and also some of the other institutions in the provincial level are not fully equipped with their members, which makes representation not complete in this respect. Until recently, there was still hope that the by-elections might take place still in this year. This seems now much less probable because it has been said that the condition would be, again, as always, COVID plays a major role, that there would have to be a herd immunity before by-elections could take place, which by many are regarded as too high conditions for them to take place. So it seems at the moment, as I said, campaigning has kind of started. The opposition has not been very strong. It seems that the government and the ruling party, of course, has a very good outlook. It's very positive about the 23 elections, given also the recent economic developments, of which you will hear more from the other speakers, but also because COVID has been an issue. It has been quite an issue, but it hasn't hit the country too hard, one would say, looking at other places. So as I've mentioned COVID a few times, I would just like to say also what it meant for the embassy. We had very strict instructions for a long time to reduce presence in the offices, like in other fields of the society and institutions as well. Since March, the embassy is practically back to work. Like everywhere in Germany, home office has become more popular, so and it has been enabled. So we also have this feature that people try to work more mobile, but in principle, the embassy is working. There's one specific circumstance, of course, which means that for months now, Germany has not been allowing Zimbabwean nationals, as from other countries in the region, to enter Germany. due to the virus mutations coming from this area. And this has, of course, hindered the exchange under the anyhow difficult conditions here in the region, and also in to allow for the exchange with Germany by traveling. But we are hopeful that this will change soon, as also now in our region, as you all know, the Delta variant has become much more prominent than the before dominant Beta one, and this should help us to improve this difficult situation about traveling between the region and Germany, and vice versa, of course. With those from Germany who are allowed to travel, of course, then coming back still had to face the 14 days of quarantine. What can be said about COVID here? Briefly, quite positive is the number of vaccinations going up. The latest figures are 1.6 million people being vaccinated, out of those more than 700,000 2 times. This, for the continental comparison, is quite guarantees Zimbabwe a place under in the first group of countries in numbers of vaccinations. Now, coming back to the general situation, one of the big issues after the elections had been in the foreign policy, mostly re-engagement, which meant that Zimbabwe was willing and committed to re-engage, especially with the Western countries, including Europe, the US. There had always been the question, how much is Zimbabwe looking to the East and doesn't care that much about the relationship with the Western countries? I would say that there is an interest by the Zimbabwean government to improve. One of the major issues, of course, are sanctions, which are still in place in the US by law, in Canada. They don't hinder any business or that don't affect the Zimbabwean population. Nevertheless, we could always experience that on one day we were told that relationships with the EU are improving, and the next day we were told that our sanctions are impeding progress in Zimbabwe. So there had been a mixed result of communication in the public field. So to look at the Western countries, with the US, particularly, it's still quite tense, despite the US being a major donor and supplier in the humanitarian and health field. With the EU, I think we have made progress. Beginning of June, we had the third round of political dialogue between the EU and Zimbabwe. Mr. Shara, who had come back from New York, where he had been ambassador for Zimbabwe for 7 years, replacing the late SB Moyo, who had fallen to COVID in January. So this meeting was quite important to see where we stand in our relations, and we were happy that the minister and also some of his colleagues and some deputy ministers had taken the time for almost a day to spend with the EU ambassadors to talk about the current issues, cooperation, the economic field, human rights, the political situation altogether. And we had quite frank and good discussion, not coinciding in all issues, of course. There are open questions, but I think it was a good start with the new minister, and we're looking forward to maintain this at least annual rhythm, and we'll try to have more meetings in between this Article 8 political dialogue. Now, coming to the bilateral relations, one has to say that the two open issues are still on the table, or maybe they're back on the table, to put it more positively. They're being discussed, hopefully. One is the issue of land expropriation in the beginning of the 2000s, which affected also German investors who are protected by the bilateral investment promotion and protection agreement. We haven't seen much progress on this, unfortunately. The government has moved more on the local people affected, and also are dealing with quite high claims from South Africa. So I'm looking forward to more consultation, to more dialogue with the government on this issue, as this is a major point for us to move forward with Zimbabwe, is that we have this issue resolved. The second one, which is also kind of the same nature and same length in that sense, going back to the beginning of the 2000s, is the outstanding debt owed to Germany. Also there, not much progress really. We understand that the government, and especially the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development, is working on a debt strategy, and we are very much optimistic to see a result of this. That hopefully in the near future we'll have more information where this is supposed to go, and that we would very much like to see a commitment by the government and the president that they are now able and prepared to handle this issue, which has been neglected, I would say, or has not been dealt with for too many years. So if we are able to move forward on these two issues, I'm very positive that other things will follow, and this will open doors between our two countries, which have been closed for too long. As I said, the new foreign minister, has taken office not too long ago. One of the things he's doing, which we are quite happy on the bilateral field, is that there will be a new ambassador in Berlin. The previous one, Ambassador Chikawa, has left Germany at the end of April after 1.5 years. I had the pleasure to meet him here and to discuss issues between the two countries. He's now back, and we're waiting for the replacement to come to Berlin pretty soon. Also to allow you, on the other side, the companies in Germany, that you're contacting the Zimbabwean embassy in Berlin, which is definitely necessary and more than useful. So that's where we stand at the moment, I would say. I had, of course, met the president in the beginning when I presented my credentials. I had a bilateral meeting with the foreign minister, also with his permanent secretary. So the willingness is there. I can confirm that, but we have to intensify our dialogue on these political issues, and to have a more, I would say, coherent approach to see where we want to go. And I know this is an issue referring also to sanctions. And sanctions also, I think there will have to be a discussion. Also, the EU is very, as I said, has very few left on this, how to go about it and how to move forward. And they will have to much more, the Zimbabwean government, do it with the British government and the US government, the actions that go beyond, especially in the US case, far beyond what the EU and including Germany have been committed to. So I'm optimistic that we can move forward. There is a willingness, and but it has to be shown. It has been proven by action by the Zimbabwean government, and I'm confident that we will see more signs on this in the coming months. This is where I would like to stop. I guess I have had my time gap, and looking forward to the further information and also to the discussion at the end of the meeting. And thank you again for participating and for offering us this forum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for your insights. It was very interesting. Next up, I would like to call up Mrs. Sekai Kuvarika, the CEO of the Confederation of the Zimbabwe Industries. She will talk to us today about the Zimbabwe's industrial sector and investment opportunities. Sekai, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alex. And good morning, Ambassador. All protocol observed. Let me just try and load my my presentation here.
You need me to help you?
Just hold on a second. Sorry. I think I'll start speaking to the presentation while I try and make sure it's shared.
Perfect. Thank you.
So what I've done is I've started my presentation by highlighting some of the investment areas or the industrial areas that are present in Zimbabwe. But I know that John Robertson is probably going to put all this into context in terms of the whole economy. But what we have tried to pick up are what you would call the key trends that we have seen in the economy or in the industrial sectors particularly. And we have also tried to track the impact of COVID on industry. We have also tried to analyze the potential impact of the disturbances in South Africa on industry. So I will speak to those at the end, but first I'll just give you a presentation on mainly the trends. I don't know if you could confirm that you can see my presentation.
We can see it. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, now I'm trying to put my video on. And I can't get the window. So I don't know if you can activate my video from your end. I would appreciate it. I don't know if
but it's okay. We can see your presentation.
Okay, that's
right. All right. Thank you.
Okay. So anyway, so what you find is that in most of the key most of the areas of the economy, what the Zimbabwe Investment Development Agency has done is try to highlight some of the industrial clusters that are possible in the different regions of the country, and this is in line with the devolution thrust that the government has now embarked on. So you will find that in a lot of cases, this presents a new investment opportunity in the sense that investments that will be directed to those particular regions are likely to be given some attention in terms of incentives to invest. You will find, areas like, I know that the picture is not very clear in terms of the lists of the areas, but I'll send the presentation with details of those areas highlighted. You will find areas like Manicaland and the tea estates there, and the timber industry that is there, as well as hydroelectric generation that is taking place also in Manicaland. You will also find in Matabeleland the leather sector is a very prominent investment opportunity there, and this is mainly due to the fact that there's a lot of livestock farming that takes place in and around Matabeleland. And also, I think you will find the steel sector is still quite active somewhat in Matabeleland as well. In Masvingo, beef production, power generation. So there are various areas of opportunity for investment in those particular areas. And I think the point of this is just highlighting that the devolution thrust that the government has taken is likely going to promote or give incentives for investments in the different regions, as well as the thrust that they are putting on rural industrialization, trying to move industrial development to other areas of the country rather than concentrate it in the major in the major cities. So as far as industry is concerned, I think some of the issues, the past year has really been with the COVID challenges. And we saw the rollout of the vaccine initiative begin with quite a lot of private sector participation and contribution. I would say that we are also experiencing a relative stable macroeconomic environment, which remains fragile and very open to risks of any policy missteps that may be taken, and also the other risks being that the current exchange rate management system seems to be faltering, as it is again creating the persistent problem where we have a huge margin between the official exchange rate and the parallel market rate, which then characterizes the market with various market distortions, with arbitrage opportunities, as well as it opens a window for corruption, if you may. We saw the introduction of the foreign currency auction system, which was the background to the auction system itself was that we were coming from a point where we had again an exchange rate management challenge, and we lobbied hard to try and get a forex auction system going, but as an interim measure to try and then move to a proper unified foreign exchange market across the economy. But it does seem that we have set up at the forex auction, and progress towards a wider market is quite slow. We have also seen, on a positive note, the falling inflation and of course the relative stability of the exchange rate. Although there is a margin between the black market rate and the official exchange rate, both exchange rates have been relatively stable. The parallel market rate would rise, but would stay within a certain range over a considerable amount of time. We have also begun to see some rising aggregate demand, and of course the good agriculture season that is upon us. The improved supply of electricity and fuel. These two are key because they were major constraints to industrial performance over the past 2-3 years, where electricity supply sometimes was as low as 30% of requirements for most industrial establishments, and the fuel supply situation was also quite bad. So the improvement in electricity supply with the medium-term and again long-term projects that are in the pipeline has been a major boost to industrial performance. And then I think largely the policy environment has remained relatively stable, and I would say relatively predictable as well. So this is what really characterizes this year so far, and the policy environment that we find ourselves in. This is just sectors, and I'll skip that. I will not move into the various sectors. Hello?
Interrupt you, but we can't see the slides actually moving. It's still on the first slide.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I wasn't clicking them.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Can you see them now?
We still only see the first slide.
Okay.
Maybe you want to...
That's fine. Okay, let me do that. This was what I was speaking to just now. Can you see the second slide?
No, maybe stop sharing a screen and then go onto the slide you're talking about, and then maybe just share it again. Is that?
Oh. Maybe I stop sharing screen.
Can you put it into presentation mode? Then we see the slide much better.
Yes, I've just put it into presentation mode, but now I need to go back to the screen sharing. Can you see it now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, so I was on here where I was just looking at the inflation developments, which you can see on that graph. I will not speak much to that. So exchange rate, and then the decline in inflation that we have seen. And then I'll look at the power generation. If you look at the data that we have in terms of the first quarter of 2021, and that the actual power generation and power supply has been quite favorable, as you can see. This compared to the past 2-3 years, where we had consecutive years of huge power supply deficit for industry. Then again, there's a huge opportunity that is presented by the current agriculture performance, and mainly due to the fact that agriculture presents a considerable agriculture commodities. We're also presenting a considerable amount of the imports that were coming into the country. So having some of that off the import bill is going to have a positive impact on the economy and on the prospects for industry. Maize has greatly improved, but when we look at wheat and soya, that is progressing slowly, but it's incrementally going up, the production volumes for those. And I think all this works together to really present a good agricultural season that can actually spur economic growth. Then I was going to go to the capacity utilization. If you look at the performance of the sectors that we have, you look at the past 10 years prior to 2020, the manufacturing sector over those 10 years had been in constant decline. So it has been a protracted period of the sector operating at below 50% of capacity, and clearly, with some bad numbers like 37%. In the first quarter of 2021, the performance was 47%. And the expectation in the second quarter in terms of average capacity utilization is about 56%. But as you can see, this is quite a varied picture across the different subsectors. But I think what we're glad to note is that there is definitely an upward movement in capacity utilization in the various industrial sectors. I will explain why that is so in a later slide. So these are the expectations for the second quarter. We are collecting data now for the second quarter, and the indications are really that it might be above 50%. Not quite sure whether we will get to 56%, but it will definitely be, capacity is going to be above 50%. And then if you look at the production volumes, again, looking at this year, in 2021 and 2020, it's again a varied picture. Other sectors experiencing decline, but again, others also experiencing some growth in comparison to 2020 to 2021. Some sectors have said that the volumes they are experiencing now, they last experienced them like more than 10 years ago. And they have actually begun to see some improvement in their performance. Then one of the other indicators has been the creation of new jobs. What we have found in the first quarter is that quite a number of firms had managed to create new jobs, and as a percentage of we were looking at as a percentage of current establishments, and this points to expansion and growth in the industrial sectors, and you find that the numbers were varying from maybe 5%, I think, to a maximum of about 13% of their current establishments in terms of jobs created in the first quarter. We also noted that there is quite some considerable companies now putting in new investments in the industrial sectors. What we are not sure about is whether these new investments are all local investments. Are they foreign partners coming on to invest in some of these companies? But what we have seen is that clearly, definitely, there is some money coming into the industrial sectors, and the money has been directed towards maybe retooling or expansion projects where actually new equipment and new plant is being procured. We have also seen that there's been some export growth over the past year, and if you look at our exports for May 2021, the clothing and textile sector has grown, building and construction, household furniture, and leather and manufactured tobacco, and these are the numbers that are currently being experienced. And of course, there's also been some decline in aquaculture, the livestock sector, and also processed foods. So if we look at what listed companies have also said in terms of their outlook for the second quarter and the rest of the year, it is largely positive. And the sectors that we tried to focus on were the retail, construction, engineering, banking, food and food and beverages. So there's largely quite a positive sentiment, but it is qualified, and it is mainly qualified by the fact that we need to be able to pin down the exchange rate management in order to sustain stability. So what has happened is that most of the growth that we are seeing in the industries, in the industrial sectors, has been largely enabled by a stable macroeconomic environment. But on the other hand, in terms of improving competitiveness in the business environment, I would say that we haven't done much. There hasn't been much traction, and a lot still needs to be done in the business policy and regulatory environment to ensure that we have a competitive environment that can make Zimbabwe the most competitive place of production for various goods. And I'll speak to some of the areas that are, areas of opportunity based on what we have seen in terms of the sectors, but I don't have that on your screen right now. It's the production of raw materials, and for the fertilizer, for the horticulture sector, and fertilizer manufacturing, there are opportunities there because we are still importing the fertilizer and agrochemical components, and also seeds and plant material is largely imported. So there is definitely an opportunity to also be able to set up some of these entities in the country, or to partner with some industries here to increase that capacity. Because there is obviously the local content policy and the industrialization policy wanting to encourage a localization and a deepening of our value chains. And also, if you look at what happened with COVID, what happened with the South African disturbances, you then also realize the importance of us deepening our value chains and being able to produce all these things locally. So from a policy front, there is a positive sentiment where local production, any setting up of local production that substitutes imports, will be looked at favorably, and incentives will be provided. But those packages of incentives, what government has done is has requested that in industry, we come up with what sort of incentives would work for the different value chains, and this is work that is under progress.
Sikai, sorry, we can still not really see the slides moving forward. Maybe you can just talk to us rather. Because I will obviously forward the slides at a later stage to everybody once you've sent them to me. Sekai? Sekai, are you there?
Somebody just interrupted me with a
Yeah,
call.
sorry, I did. It was me, Alexa.
Hello?
Hi, Sekai, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry to be interrupting you. We still can't see you moving the slides. So I'm wondering if you should rather just stop sharing the screen and just talk to us.
All right, that's
I
fine.
can share the slides at a later stage.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. And then you can turn your video
I
on.
lost my connection.
It's okay. And then you can turn your video on.
Okay. Great. So now I can, okay, yeah. All right. So I was just on the packaging industry when I lost my my connection. You know, there's also still a lot of imported. We are still importing finished packaging, as well as some packaging components, and of course some of them are petroleum based, and we don't have the capacity. There is no capacity here to do them. But clearly, in terms of finished packaging products, there is opportunity to be able to produce those or to partner with local industry. What we have seen is that these opportunities in packaging largely lie at supplying new and emerging small enterprises or small to medium enterprises, because you find that the larger packaging capacity is absorbed by the traditional companies that sort of have long-running contracts with the packaging companies in the country. So the small and medium enterprises that are seeking to produce products to penetrate export markets struggle to secure locally produced appropriate packaging. So the packaging industry does also present an opportunity. And then in the clothing industry, you know, the production of dyes and other chemicals, buttons, and various other components that go into clothing manufacturing, you know, the buttons, the zips, and all these things that are imported because there's no local production capacity for those particular things, is also presents an opportunity for setting up industrial companies in those particular sectors. Then when we look at the South African at the impact of the South African disturbances, really, if you look at the import of raw materials into the country, you find that about 50%, I would say, 49% of the raw materials into Zimbabwe are coming from South Africa, or they're coming from South Africa, and then another 50% coming from the rest of the world. But that other 50% also has a component that comes via South Africa because it is coming via the Durban port. So that exposure, should there be any disturbances in South Africa, would definitely have a notable impact on Zimbabwean industries. But what we noted from companies was that they had not started feeling the impact in terms of the current disturbances. So they have not really reported that they are largely impacted, save for a few, but they were expecting that if the disturbances had become protracted and prolonged, then that the sort of impact that would come in would be that those bottlenecks in the supply of in the supply of raw materials. So we're still largely dependent on South Africa as a source market, as well as a channel to other markets where we are importing from. But and vice versa, when you're looking at the exports, it's again the same thing. Our exports are destined for South Africa. but also destined for other countries, but going via South Africa. So what I probably wanted to highlight to this meeting is that there is clearly some positive sentiment, and business confidence and expectations are largely positive, seeing that the general trend upwards in terms of growth in the industrial sectors. If you can see that they are putting money in equipment and plants, they are creating new jobs, capacity is going up, and production volumes are rising. I think that sort of gives a sense that the environment is much better. But again, this is largely premised on the relative stability that we have been experiencing, and a lot of work remains to be done by both government and the private sector in terms of coming up with a more competitive environment that can make Zimbabwe a competitive place of production for many goods. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting. If you can forward that presentation to me later today, then I can forward it to all the participants as well. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please post these in the chat. I'm not going to ask them now, as we are running a bit behind on schedule. So next up is Mr. John Robertson from Robertson's Economics, who will be talking to us about the economic outlook of Zimbabwe. I will in fact be sharing my screen this time. John, are you there?
Well, a very good morning, and thank you very much for the invitation to participate. And I hope that you can put up my graphs. I'd like to go through these first. And if you can go to the first graph, it is really to pick up the trends that we've been looking at. We're up to the figures for July, and so you can see there how the 2021 line at the top is a fairly steady and a fairly gentle slope, but that is still a very high rate of inflation. But it has become a much lower annual rate of inflation. You can see 56.4% there, and the index going to 3,000. And I must point out that the index was 100 in February of 2019. So we've gone from an index of 100 to an index of 3,000 in the time since February 2019. So we've suffered a very high rate of inflation. And you can see the line for 2020 there, the red line, had a very sharp acceleration May, June in 2020. That's only last year. So we've had to wait the full year to get through to July this year to see the annual rate of inflation go below 100%. Back in June, it was 106%. And in months before that, it was a good deal higher. And you can see at the very end of the graph there, I'm pointing out that it was 348% inflation when we were comparing the 2019 December figure with 2020 December. The very high rate of inflation has certainly destabilized a great many things in Zimbabwe. It's good that the rate has come down, but we have to recognize that it is still a very high rate of inflation. The next graph tries to pick out a couple of items within the index. So here I'm just comparing the figures. So you can see I've gone back to that to talk about the February 2019 equaling 100. You can see if you go back to 2019 where those purple lines are all merged together. And so that the rapid rate again is visible for 2020. And it does allow you to distinguish between the consumer price index, which is the lower of the three, the clothing price index in purple, and above that, the food price index. So there's quite a variation in the costs of producing many of the goods that we do produce in the country. And to remain competitive in their fields, these separate manufacturers have to contend with a great many uncertainties. And among the uncertainties faced by the food manufacturers is the cost of importing food compared to the cost of producing and processing food within the country. And sometimes our local processing costs are very high, and that makes the imported varieties cheaper. And that's something that we do need to address very vigorously within the country, because we have made ourselves less competitive than we should be. The next graph, I hope, will just enlighten us a bit further. I'm here comparing the exchange rates, and the issue here is that we had that very high inflation. The inflation is illustrated there in the orange bars, the orange patch on the bottom. And you can see it is a much lower rate of inflation since September or so last year. So we've yet to have a full year of this lower rate of inflation. But the exchange rate, you can see the actual interbank exchange rate that I've highlighted there in June. And that did become a more stable exchange rate. You can see that's going from around September of last year through to June. It's a fairly steady line. It is gradually moving upwards. But I've picked up a blue line there to show you what should have happened to the exchange rate with the monthly inflation that we've had. It didn't happen. So the exchange rate has been held at a figure around about 80 Zimbabwe dollars to $1 US. It's now gone to 85. It should by now have gone to 95. And if we had reached 95 by July this year, I think we would have less of a problem with the black market rate. Previously, we've spoken about it as a parallel market rate, but this is a black market. It's a black market on which, if you want this currency, the scarcity of the currency allows somebody else to make a very substantial profit selling it to you who want it. And that profit is unproductive, it's not taxed, and it is very discouraging to the people trying to produce goods, having to pay extra to buy the foreign currency, to buy the imported requirements they need for their industry. So one of our major problems has not been overcome, and that is the fact that we have more than one exchange rate. And the official rate might be very important, of course it is, but it only accounts for about 1/3 of the total imports. And so about 2/3 of what we're importing is paid for with money bought on this black market at a rate that is very much to the disadvantage of the importer and their cost in the final production, when they're having to spend that much money to buy the imported requirements to make the products within the country, or even to sell finished goods if they're using that money to buy finished products from elsewhere. So I'm arguing here that we've got a lot of work to do to overcome our exchange rate problem. We need one exchange rate, not a multiple variety of exchange rates, which give some people profits for doing no work at all. The next graph, please. I'm trying to illustrate here government's tax revenues and how rapidly government's tax revenues have gone up. But I have to point out here, as I've put into the label for the vertical axis there, this is a picture of dollars of declining value. So there's lots more of them, but their value is going up. The value is going down. The value of the Zimbabwe dollars are going down. The number might be going up very rapidly, but in real terms, the government's revenues have not improved by an amount that suggests the government can actually accomplish more of the challenges that face it right now, because the money they are collecting in tax is of decreasing value. But it has gone up enormously, and that's been at the expense of the purchasing power of the population. And I think that we are a very seriously overtaxed population, but that doesn't state it properly. What I have to point out here is that the tax-paying population is a very small percentage of the Zimbabwe population. We need considerably more taxpayers, and we need government to relax its pressures on the taxpayers that it does have, because this is a small portion of the population bearing a very high cost so that government can collect its tax revenues. But that's an illustration mainly of the shrinking value of the Zimbabwe. Slide, please. I'm wanting to point out our principal sources of income. And we are a country at work. We're in business. And I think that we have done very well, in particular with the mining sector. Mining has taken over as the principal source of foreign currency earnings for the country. It used to be agriculture, but mining is now more important than it was before, partly because you'll see the platinum and palladium in the graph there. Those are fairly new mines. If you're to go back to the days when things were rather more normal before our land reform program, which started happening in 1997, the platinum and palladium production was at that stage only in the planning stages, and it had contributed very little to total earnings. But now you can see the platinum and palladium between them there add up to about as much as the value of gold. And there are other platinum group metals in the mix, which bring in a bit more money. But this is the picture of the main sources of income from the mining sector. But we do have others, and one of the principal byproducts of the platinum mines is nickel. And nickel is also earning us a great deal of money at the moment. The next slide, please. To get to agriculture, we have had an extraordinarily good year for rain. The rainfall has encouraged a great deal more enthusiasm amongst the farmers, and they did plant a larger hectareage under maize, and you can see that we have produced the best maize crop for a very long time. You can see on that graph when up to the year 2000, while the land reform program was being planned, 1998, 1999, 2000, maize production actually went up a bit, but after the land redistribution exercise really started, you can see that maize production dropped considerably down to the figure for 2002. And on after that, we only produced more than 1 million tons in 1 year, that was 2014, until we got through to the more recent years. But you can see also 2019, 2020, we were down again below 1 million tons. And that meant that we were importing more than 1 million tons of maize every single year through those years. And one of the reasons that the finances in the country went badly wrong is that we suddenly became very dependent on food imports as a country. We didn't have the money to spare, but as a priority item, food had to be imported. And so that meant there was less money for everything else. And the everything else included here the repayment of debt. The fact that we couldn't settle our debts meant that people could no longer borrow additional amounts. The government itself couldn't borrow more amounts because they couldn't settle the debts they had already. And that has held the country back a great deal. We haven't overcome our debt burden yet. And in fact, most of the debt today is the penalties that we face for not having paid the debt we already had on time. But the maize picture there is a very, very pleasing one. And we have to hope that in the coming years, we can match those levels of output. But I have to emphasize that we had an exceptionally good rainfall year. And here in the tropics, we can never be sure of that. And I suspect we might have to wait a few more years before we have another good year as good as the one we've just had. The next graph, to carry on the agricultural sector, the wheat production we're hoping for this year will be higher. The wheat crop is still in the ground. We grow wheat in winter. and it has to be under irrigation. We are unfortunately going through an increasing number of power cuts at the moment. And that does of the wheat crop, because if the power goes off for the irrigation schemes, it means that the crop would suffer quite badly until the power comes on again. But with any luck, we will produce a better wheat crop this year than we did last year. But you can see that before the land reform program started, wheat crops were normally much higher. It's a very expensive business running irrigation schemes, and under the land reform program, not many farmers could be found initially who could cope with the challenges of irrigation. But electricity has been one of the major handicaps, and this is something that we are still to address. We are speaking all the time about new power stations, but we don't seem to get on with the job. One of the power stations that was approved 10 years ago has yet to be built. And if we start building it now, it's going to take another 5 years to complete that power station. So this is a separate issue, which is by no means past. We've still got to work very hard to overcome our power problems. And right now, the way we are dealing with it is we're importing very much more power than we've ever imported before. So the next graph, please. The main agricultural export revenue earner is tobacco. And this is to illustrate, you can see the heavy green line through that graph compares the prices we've been being paid this year for tobacco compared with the recent years. And you can see it's been running roughly along the best line. We did have a very disappointing year in 2019, but done not too badly this year. The size of the crop, just a little bit under 200 million kilograms. The selling season is almost complete now. There's just a few winding up sales to be held, but it's brought in something close to $500 million US, and that's been a very useful source of income. It's also a useful employment source for more than 150,000 growers, but those growers are typically growing only a few hectares of tobacco. It's a very different industry from the days when it was grown by a few thousand growers who were growing 50, 100 hectares each. So when we now have 150, it might be 180,000 growers growing one or two industry from what we used to have. And I don't think we've fully adapted to the challenges of the small-scale growers who use different kinds of fuel to cure the tobacco and are causing quite a severe environmental impact because of the way they are having to do the job. The next slide, please. I'm putting here the cotton crop this year. We're hoping for a bigger cotton crop than we've had for a couple of years, but you can see again that in the days before the land reform program, we had large-scale commercial growers. Those are the ones on the left-hand side of the graph where I've illustrated the large-scale growers in that sort of light brown, orangey color. They don't exist anymore because they were the farmers driven off the land. And we now do depend on small-scale growth. You can see that the size of the crop has been very disappointing for quite some years now, and we have a lot of work to do to get back to the volumes of cotton we used to grow. We are in competition with the rest of the world where the growers are allowed to use genetically modified cotton seed, and we are not allowed to use genetically modified cotton seed in Zimbabwe. Other varieties of cotton are beginning to produce better yields and at slightly lower cost. The principal reason for the genetic modification was to reduce the size of pesticides reduce the cost of pesticides. Some progress has been made with new varieties in that direction, but I think it does not yet compete with the genetically modified seed, which need almost no pesticides at all. Anyway, we do have some progress in cotton, and we hope to see more in the coming years. The next slide, please. I wanted to illustrate here that we have a financial problem because of some of our agricultural policies. Now, I've put maize, wheat, and cotton up to make the point that we're subsidizing these crops. The government is funding the production of those because the farmers themselves cannot borrow money from the banks. The major handicap this government imposed on the country was with the land reform program, where they said that they would now no longer be the private property of individuals. All the agricultural farmland in the country would belong, and that immediately said to the banks that the land is now no longer suitable as lack of security for a bank loan. Action carried out by caused a break, at least it said broke the link between the banks and the farmers. So now we are having to fund, at least the government is having to fund the farmers because the banks cannot do so. And the government is subsidizing these crops in order to encourage the farmers to get out there. But that has been massive money supply growth rates. These are not all that big, and I've illustrated that at the bottom of the graph showing the inflation adjusted in Zimbabwe dollar terms, the value of the money. The value of the money is actually much lower. And therefore, in Zimbabwe dollar terms, the figures have gone to very large numbers, but in proper US dollar terms, they are not quite so dramatic. But the next graph, if I may have it, will show you what has happened to the banks. The banks are not lending nearly as much as they used to the business sector. So this is percentage of deposits on loan to the private sector, and it's gone down because the banks are now being pressurized by government to lend them the money so that they can fund the subsidies for maize, for wheat, and for cotton. We've got things wrong here. We shouldn't have to subsidize these crops. We should especially not subsidize things like maize or wheat because these are internationally traded commodities. And if you upset the price locally, you'll find yourself becoming uncompetitive with foreign suppliers. And millers in this country have found it cheaper to import maize than to buy it from local growers, because the local growers have been paid a very much higher price than be payable on the ordinary market. And when you have market relationships of this nature, you put the whole country at risk. And we need to work our way away from subsidies. And from the banking side, we need to restore the ability of the banks to continue supporting the business sector. Here we are looking at the banks supporting the government's subsidization policy. And I think there is another distortion in our economy that we've got to overcome. Until we get rid of these subsidies, I think we will have a distorted expenditure demand on the government. And that is part of the reason why we have such high taxes and why the tax-paying population is not nearly as big as it should be. If I may go to the next graph. The ability that the country has to attract investment has been one of the major issues that has affected the country's growth rate and recovery rate. You can see that we've not done well. The foreign direct investment inflows are lower than for almost every other country in Africa. And we have not been competitive enough to attract the investors because we've turned the country into something, well, you think twice about bringing money to the country because it's very evident that the government is trying to run a centrally planned economy and wants very direct control over every, and they extract this control, requiring every investor to purchase licenses and permits for every single thing they want. And these permits and licenses have to be applied for, and the application for these permits and licenses is itself very expensive. And many of the permits and licenses have to be renewed every year or every 2 years. And that all adds up to a further discouragement. You might feel, what if my renewal application doesn't go through? Have I invested all the money that I put into this business for nothing now that I can't renew my license? These sorts of things, I'm afraid, have discouraged investment, and I believe we need to completely revise our policy. We are no longer with it, and we need to work very hard to make our investment environment at least competitive with everyone around us. People who are investing in Africa are frequently choosing countries other than Zimbabwe because the difficulties of actually placing their investment and getting the business up and running, the difficulties are far less serious in neighboring countries than they are in Zimbabwe. But we are competing with the rest of the world for investment capital, and we therefore need to become determined to become as competitive as are the most attractive investment destinations in other countries. So, ladies and gentlemen, my thanks again for the chance to swap these ideas with you. And I would be happy to continue with a few more observations at this time, but allow me to say that the difficulties that we face, we can overcome them. We do have enormous potential in the country. I'm very eager to see this potential fully realized. At one time, our manufacturing sector, which I should have gone into in more detail, but it's very difficult to get the figures these days, and certainly very difficult to get up to date on manufacturing output. But in the days when I used to work in industry, I finished my working life as a banker, but I was previous to that in the manufacturing sector. And in those days, we were manufacturing many, many thousands of separate consumer items, which meant that we did not have to import those. And for a great many of them, we had export markets. The manufacturing sector in today's Zimbabwe is very much smaller than it used to be. We have, of course, seen massive changes around the world, and Chinese consumer goods are very cheap, very attractive in many cases, and highly competitive, and we would have to work very hard to match those, but we could do so, and we did do so before. We were manufacturing transistor radios in competition with the Japanese transistor radios, and we were successful. We were manufacturing clothing and footwear in competition with French and Italian manufacturers of clothing and footwear, and we succeeded. The factories that used to produce those goods are no longer with us. We need to rebuild those. And I believe the productivity of our labor force in Zimbabwe is as good as anywhere. And I feel that we should do very much more to become deserving of the investment support that I think we could certainly make successful if the investors could simply find it a safer and more attractive place to send their investment funding. Ladies and gentlemen, a pleasure to talk to you, and I'll be very happy to try and answer questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, John. That was super interesting. If there's any questions, please post these in the chat. I'm not going to ask them now. I'll ask them a bit later in our Q&A session as we are running short of time. So for now, I will call up our next speaker, Mr. Dominicus Collenberg from Organic Africa, who's a German businessman in Harare, to give us some insight into his experiences while working there. You're muted, Dominic.
Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Good, excellent. So thank you very much, Gerhard, Ambassador Udo Volz, Sekai Kuravika, Matthias Boddenberg, John Bernd, ladies and gentlemen. So 3 topics today. Number 1, what we do. Number 2, how to start in Zimbabwe. And number 3, how to win in Zimbabwe. So this presentation here is probably of no interest for any company which wants to sell products worth $100,000 or $200,000 per year here in Zimbabwe. You need to be bigger. So in case that you are aiming to do 100,000, 200,000 sales here, you have 15 minutes time to prepare a good tea. So what we do, Organic Africa, we have invested a low double-digit million-dollar figure in Zimbabwe, and we will increase this to a high double-digit million-dollar figure in the coming years. We concentrate on certified natural products. We have a variety of companies, Organic Africa, Bayuba, Casa, La Rochelle, where we work all over Zimbabwe in all the different areas, producing on our own farms with small-scale farmers and with wild collectors. We produce mainly herbs and spices on a farm which is called La Rochelle in the Eastern Highlands. There we produce things like peppermint, spearmint, a variety of other tea products. Then in the north of the country, close to the Zambezi, we work on our own farms. It's called stevia, where we produce for example, Rosella, and as well with 5,000 small-scale farmers. Typical products, our raw materials are used in high-quality teas, which you can buy all over. You can get them in South Africa, all over Europe, North America, but as well in Asia. And let me say some words, a little excursion, how to start in Zimbabwe. We have seen a history of burned investments here in Zimbabwe, and if I look at them, they always have the same root cause. They started from top down. So in the end, they started with influential people and worked from the top down to the implementation in the different regions or on their different factories, etc. And this often failed. And there, whoever the partner was, it was never, the partnership never survived the changes which are, of course, happening in a country like Zimbabwe. What we did, on the other hand, and there is a long history of successful investments in Zimbabwe, where start from the bottom up. So in the end, to start your investments small and then grow steadily within the economic environment you face. We started here 2007. We produced then something like 200 kgs or so. We are currently at around 700 tons of this high quality tea, herbal teas. We are aiming to nearly double it within the next 5 years.
Mr. Boddenberg, sorry to
Yes.
interrupt. I just want to ask, are you sharing, are you moving slides across? Because we're still seeing the first slide.
Yes, I have shared a lot of slides, and so
I can see the slide.
See.
The Organic Africa Group slide, the first slide, right?
We can see slides. I think
I
there's
can see
something.
the slides perfectly.
Oh, okay. So you're seeing this. Okay, no, that's fine. Great. It's maybe just me.
Okay, so there is a slide now at the moment with wild collectors, and Bayuba is on top.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so I will continue. So here, one business is called Bayuba, where we concentrate on the wild collection of baobab products. Now, I must admit. And these products are then used internationally, all exported in beverages, in food and cereals, and in sweets. Some of them, by the way, really nice. Again, we have started this business in 2009, very small, and we have then developed the business here in Zimbabwe, and we are at the moment the second biggest producer on earth, and we are with currently roughly 140 tons or so of exports of this processed baobab powder. And we are aiming to be the biggest within the next 3 years, and aim at half the world market in the next 5 years. Another business is called CASA, where we work with indigenous underutilized species, we call them. They are oils for the cosmetic industry, and the last business line we have is La Rochelle Country House, a hotel in the Eastern Highlands, where we offer hospitality services. Another small excursion: how to begin a business in Zimbabwe is bring your own infrastructure. John Robertson has mentioned the erratic power supply. We had, for example, one farm where we didn't have power at all for 7.5 months. And so in the end, and on the other hand, we have seen investors who came here who had agreements with water suppliers, power suppliers, etc. And this kind of agreements are not necessarily helpful. So in the end, if you work here, if you want to produce here, bring your own infrastructure. So water, roads, power, you have to bring yourself and maintain it yourself and make sure that you are in control of this. And once you have set all of this up, the important thing is that you have to have a strong fortification. This fortification is, of course, in our case called BIPA, and Ambassador Foltz does a lot for this. Questions which one is asked as an investor here in Zim is typically, do the Chinese companies have advantages? And there it is a clear no. There are no particular advantages other countries have in Zimbabwe. On the other hand, they face the same challenges as everyone else does. It's a question on how to deal with these challenges. A second question is money in, money out. Africa is well known for the easy access of bringing money into African countries, and it's always difficult to get the money out. If you work with international banks, and there are international banks here, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you still see my slides?
Yes.
Because I was interrupted. If you about money in and out, so you can get money out of Zimbabwe legally if it is possible. The other thing is, of course, the other question I'm often asked is what you do an exception, so that we Zim, is this exceptional? And the answer is very simple, it's ordinary. So everyone can do it. There's absolutely nothing special about what we do. Let me, just one question, can you still see my slides?
Yes, I can see you're on slide social investment and now impact.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. Excellent, thank you. So what we do here is we focus on our impact, and the impact is not only measured in US dollars, but in what we do and achieve here on the ground. So currently we work with roughly 160,000 hectares certified organic here in Zimbabwe. Our social impact is that we try to produce and process in the communities as much as possible and improve the livelihoods in the rural areas of Zimbabwe. We then make sure that our products are certified and that our impact is measurable, so that whatever we do can be measured and published and then talked about. We have major customers like Mesmati, etc., and who use us on their web pages, even though we are in Zimbabwe. In conclusion, what we do here, the companies I have introduced, Stevia, La Rochelle, the companies producing herbs, spices, etc. And then Bayuba, Casa, the wild collection activities. In conclusion, let me say that what we do here, the bottom-up approach, is solid and possible, and if you follow that, you have a very good chance to work in Zimbabwe. The other thing is that we now are going to expand. We are going to expand into row crops, into CO2, into fresh products, into avocados. So either, if you want to do the same, either don't or partner with us. Then the other part which I would like to mention is that if one invests in Zimbabwe or wants to sell in Zimbabwe, you have to have enough turnover. The reason to it is that what you have seen from John's presentation, there are often disturbances in Zimbabwe, and that means that businesses have to readjust. And they have to readjust often overnight. You often have the situation that you get an information of a new statutory instrument at 6 at night, and it is implemented tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. So then you have to you have two options: to either readjust to start a special purpose vehicle, etc., or to lose a lot of money. And so therefore, as you don't want to lose a lot of money, you need to have a lot of the decision-making powers on the ground. And this is expensive, so therefore you need to have considerable turnover here in Zimbabwe to pay for the right knowledge and the good management here in Zimbabwe. If you do this, I warmly invite you to come and
Mr. Collenberg, I think we lost the last couple of seconds of your.
If you have your feet on the ground,
Okay.
You will be extremely.
I think you're breaking up a bit.
Thank you very much. I hand over to you, Ms. Gerard.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Collenberg. You broke up a bit towards the end, but I think we all got the gist of what you were saying. I will now, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting. I will now hand over to my colleague, Mr. Bernd Doppelfeld, who's our representative in Zimbabwe, who will be talking about the potentials and opportunities there. Oh, let me share my screen for you. There we go.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Alexa. Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Bernd Doppelfeld. I'm the local representative of the Southern African German Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Zimbabwe. I have been in Zimbabwe now for almost 28 years. So you can imagine I saw a lot of ups and downs, unfortunately more downs. This is the first time that we're organizing such an event. The first three were physical events held in Joburg for German business. And now this is the first online event. And I'm very happy that we can reach out for a broader audience now. So we can also reach Germany itself. Next slide, please. Okay, yeah, I want to tell you something about my office. I'm working on a part-time basis because when the chamber decided to go into the region, they opened offices in Maputo, Mozambique, and Lusaka in Zambia. But they said it's not worthwhile at the moment to do it because of the economic environment and the situation at that time was not favorable. So they decided to engage me as a contact point in Zimbabwe. Yeah, and so I'm answering company requests, responding to company requests from Zimbabwe companies, German companies, organizing sessions like this. Then we organize quite a number of delegation visits to Zimbabwe, mainly in mining. Last year we planned a delegation visit for renewable energies for April, but that of course had to be cancelled because of the corona pandemic. But we did this on a virtual basis, and I must say that was quite successful. Yeah, and also the theme was quite appropriate because there is quite a lot of sunshine in the country. Then we also organized individual talks during our consulting days, and we planned this again for September this year, where I talk individually to German companies. I get a lot of support from the regional headquarters in Johannesburg, and and also their competence centers like mineral resources, sustainable energies, agriculture, water, and training. Then, end of 2017, when we had the regime change in the country, and the government came up with a mantra, Zimbabwe is open for business, we became also very enthusiastic that things would improve. And it was decided to go and open now a fully fledged office. This was, we applied for the registration in 2019, but the same year it was already put on ice because things did not develop as we would have liked to. The office is now registered after a few glitches, yeah, but we are ready. Next slide, please. Next slide, Alexa.
I think there might be a small delay, but I have switched.
Ah, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Can you see it now?
No, I still see the the second slide actually about the Harare office.
Okay, let me try again. I'm going to stop sharing and share again.
We can see it.
Okay. Can you see it?
No, I cannot. Yeah, now we are there. Look, a lot has already been said during the presentations now. Sekai highlighted quite many things, and also John Robertson about the potential in the country. So we are also, I think, short in time. So I just will highlight a few things. We've got amazing mineral resources in the country. Yeah, there are more than 40 different minerals. Yeah, and here just a few are mentioned. People say everywhere where you start to dig in Zimbabwe, you will find something. I highlighted here lithium, yeah, which is the mineral at the moment because it's needed for the manufacturing of batteries. And there is quite a high demand. And Zimbabwe's got some of the largest deposits in the world. Even the big neighbor, South Africa, doesn't have those. As beneficiation is a big issue in the country, I could imagine, yeah, also that batteries maybe could be manufactured here, but I haven't seen any initiative on this side yet. Maybe later Sekai can also comment on this. Then a lot has to be done in infrastructure. It was already mentioned, electricity is absolutely not satisfactory, although the government makes quite some efforts here, which means also companies, for example, they have to use generators for backup, yeah, which need, of course, a lot of diesel. Yes, not good for the environment and increases their cost. But many companies are turning now to solar, yeah, which is, of course, coming thing now. When it comes to transport, the railways are basically not existing, yeah, so which means transport has to go via roads. Yeah, and the roads are also in very bad conditions. Some parts of the main connections have been repaired, but it's still a drop in the ocean. So when you drive long distances in Zimbabwe, it can be a nightmare because of the conditions of the roads and also the congestions through the trucks. Water is a real problem. Yeah, for example, the reticulation in Harare is in a very bad state. I haven't had water at home from the city of Harare for more than 10 years now. So I have to help myself with boreholes. As Dominic already said, you have to take your infrastructure with you. You cannot rely on the general infrastructure. It sounds a bit funny, but I have no water in my pipes, yeah, but I got a fiber to the home from internet. So at least this part of the infrastructure is working reasonably well, but mainly also only in cities. Then the industrial infrastructure, a lot of the industrial infrastructure is outdated and needs rehabilitation. Yeah, and there I see a lot of potential for German companies because Germany is one of the major suppliers in the world for industrial plants. Agriculture, a lot has already been said about agriculture, but there I see a lot of possibilities to improve agricultural output. I got also quite a number of requests from Zimbabweans who have land or have access to land and looking for partners to help them in cultivation of this land. Then, of course, agricultural equipment is needed. When we see the positive effects, the good rainy season, the last good rainy season had, yeah, so we can see also that, for example, investment into or provision of equipment for irrigation, yeah, could be a good business. Yeah, and there is one news, what I heard recently, there's one German investor who intends to invest into the growing of medical cannabis on a bigger scale. So there is investments in the agricultural sector also from Germany. Tourism is, of course, a sector which is very much affected by the COVID pandemic. A friend of mine, he came out here for 3 weeks and he visited a lot of places and he said, look, hey, Zimbabwe is just a real big holiday park. Yeah, we've got, of course, the Victoria Falls, famous Victoria Falls, lovely game parks. Lake Kariba, paradise for fishing enthusiasts, the lovely picturesque Eastern Highlands. And he was right. It's a holiday park, and I see a lot of potential there. And there's a very positive note. Lufthansa's daughter company Eurowings will be flying to Windhoek to Vic Falls from next year onwards, which is of course very attractive for German tourists. As mentioned, we organized already quite a number of delegation visits to Zimbabwe for mining, and last year for renewable energies, but we have already worked out proposals for delegation visits for agriculture and tourism, and I hope these will be materialized soon. The next slide, please. Okay, but of course there are still downside, and especially John Robertson mentioned those. The macroeconomic climate is unfortunately not the best, although inflation has, on the inflation side, we have an improvement. It's still there. Then there are foreign exchange shortages. The government has a budget deficit. There are also multiple currencies, which is sometimes very difficult to handle, insufficient capital, and therefore also high interest rates. Then, yeah, it was also mentioned the low foreign direct investment. Yeah, the macroeconomic challenges and the negative perception, yeah, hold people, investors off to invest into Zimbabwe. Then, and also the ambassador mentioned this already, then Zimbabwe is cut off from international credit lines. Yeah, World Bank and IMF are not providing credits now, money to Zimbabwe, although the negotiations are going on. But this is mainly because of the lack of political reforms. So the inadequate infrastructure, yeah, I have already mentioned. Then ineffective public administrations. Dominic mentioned already, with all the permits and whatever you need, and we experienced this already ourselves when we registered the chamber office here in Zimbabwe. It took quite a long time. A process which should take only 6 weeks took us 9 months. Then Zimbabwe is landlocked, which is of course a disadvantage. It hasn't got ports like Durban or Port Elizabeth in South Africa, so everything has to go via the roads. And I mentioned already how the status of the roads is, and also the difficulties with transport via road. But finally, something positive. The industrial base is still very good, and Sika mentioned already, capacity utilization in the industrial sector, in the manufacturing sector, has gone up recently. When I drive through the industrial areas in Harare, I actually think sometimes, hey, what's actually going on? Because you see many well-operated companies, yeah, and I'm also representing the German Senior Expert Service in Zimbabwe. So I have the opportunity to see many companies, visit many companies, and most of them are all well managed and efficient. And that brings me now to a very important point. There is a tremendous human capital in this country. They are not only friendly people, there's a high degree of education, they've got good work ethics, and that, why I would, sorry, we are still on the other slide. I should have asked Alexa to move. Okay, still broad industrial base. I mentioned this already, and I'm now on the human capital side. And because of this, because of the people, that's why I believe that at one stage Zimbabwe will take off. They are no strangers to crisis. They are able to manage crisis, and now even during the COVID pandemic, they have shown a great deal of resilience. They are wonderful people, and you will be able to find good business partners here. Yeah, here I write, to build up trust will be essential. I think that's very important. Although progress has been made in certain areas, I think it's on the government side to act here, because what we need is foreign investment. And investors, they are like shy animals. Wherever there's noise, they run away, and there is still too much noise. But to finish, I can only say, stay in touch. Stay in touch with Zimbabwe. Keep Zimbabwe on your radar screen. Hopefully, when the corona crisis abates, then you can come here, establish your contacts and your networks to get you into a good starting position. Myself and my colleagues in Johannesburg, Berlin, Frankfurt, and wherever they are here to help. I would like to thank my fellow Ambassador Foltz, for their contributions here. I would like to thank Alexa, Angie, Nikita, Marie Julia for all the help to organize this session. And thanks all of you for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bernd. That was a very positive presentation. Thank you very much. I will now open the floor to questions. Please raise your hands or post them in the chat, as we now have a short window available for Q&A and an open discussion. I think Mr. Bodenberg's question regarding how the riots here in South Africa affected the supply chains into Zimbabwe is still open. So I call on the presenters to answer. And then maybe some other questions will pop up. Ben, maybe you can comment on the transport, Mr. Bodenberg's question from the beginning, how the supply chains were affected by the riots, and maybe Mr. Collenbach as well. Oh, Deutsche Connect has his hands raised.
Hello.
Yeah, I didn't get the question actually.
Okay. I think
Hello.
Hand raised. So yeah, you can ask your question.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Kumbirai Chpadza from Deutsche Connect, based in Germany. All protocols observed. Thank you very much for the presentations. And as our company name suggests, Deutsche Connect is connecting Germany, and in this particular case to Zimbabwe, as a Zimbabwean. I mean, after all is said and done, I wanted to ask, and maybe I would put Bent more on the spotlight, as he's the one who's there, to say, what needs to be done apart from a political level, but from a business level, in terms of getting German companies to not only to invest, but to partner with Zimbabwean companies, as well as getting Zimbabwean companies as well to get their products into Germany. I've followed a lot in terms of other countries, and there's still a very big, wide gap between Zimbabwe and Germany in that. So my question will go to Bent, probably maybe Dominicus as well, since they're also in Zimbabwe. Yeah, if they could answer. Thank you.
I was muted. Yeah, sorry. As mentioned earlier, I respond to quite a number of questions from queries from Zimbabwean companies and also German companies. Unfortunately, during the corona crisis, they became less and less. So at the moment, there's not that much interest, I believe, but that might encourage people, to come to talk to me, and also, if possible, to come and visit Zimbabwe again. Yeah, because as I said, there is quite a potential. You will find great business partners here, but the companies have to make their effort.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. So from our side, on the one hand, transport, etc., South Africa. So what we simply did is, of course, on our exports, we channeled them to Beira. So that means that we have on the export side, of course, we have the two harbors, either South Africa or Mozambique. We even brought one container now last week to Walfish Bay, Namibia. So that is possible, and so the costs are in fact not massively different. Beira is of course the cheapest. So therefore, South Africa is not the only way for our exports. Imports, again, the same. You can import via Beira and via Walvis Bay as well. So therefore, if you have full container loads, that's of course the request. How to improve production here and the connection to the German market. In the end, it's about security of in Zimbabwe. So once we have the moment the security is given, more investments can be made, and that is the bottleneck I can see.
Thank you, Mr. Kornberg. I see there's another question. Let me check in the chat. Okay. Carsten, you have your hands raised.
Yes, thank you. I do. Hello. Hello from Cape Town. My name is Carsten from a company called Memcon. We do water treatment technologies and mining, etc. here in Southern Africa. Just a quick question about local conditions for starting operations and businesses. We have quite serious challenges, not to say troubles, with Black economic empowerment in South Africa. As business owner, the question is there such similar system operational in Zimbabwe when it comes to BEE or something to that extent? And if so, like in South Africa, it becomes stricter and stricter and quite, let's say, a negative challenge to any kind of investor, which also keeps people away. Is there such similar trend in Zimbabwe?
Shall I come in here? So our experience is that we had very strict regulations here where companies had to hand over 51% of their shares to local partners, foreign companies. This has changed with the new dispensation to 2018. And at the moment, you can own 100% of your company in Zimbabwe as a foreign investor. Straightforward, there are, this is the rule, and it is implemented, and it's straightforward.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks. Good to know.
Thank you, Carsten. Any other questions? If there are no further questions, I will hand over to our Deputy CEO here at the Chamber, Mr. Bastian Litzbar, for the closing remarks. Bastian, you seem frozen.
I'm frozen. Am I back again?
No. No, you are. Now you are.
Okay, internet seems to be quite spotty today, eh?
Today,
okay,
yeah.
So thank you everyone. Thank you everyone for joining. Also a very warm thank you to Ambassador Volz and all speakers today for the information about Zimbabwe. I'm still a rather new addition to the Africa connection here, so it was valuable information for me, and I'm very much looking forward to be able to visit our colleague and you soon in the future. I would also like to extend my thanks to our regional coordinator, Ms. Gerard, for organizing this, and all the colleagues who are also involved. And now it only leaves me to say I'm actually able to sit without a vest now. It appears that winter is slowly coming to an end here in Johannesburg. I'm very much looking forward to this. And ending then on time, wishing you all a very good and sunny weekend, and see you all soon, hopefully in person and not virtual. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely rest of your afternoon and weekend.
Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
Yeah, thank you also from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you.